The waves crash against the rocks with a fury only I know. I feel every drop that is lost, every river that dries up, every tear shed by my children. My name is Iemanjá, and I am the mother of all the waters that exist. Today, I look at this arid land, and I feel my heart shatter like foam on a stormy sea. It has been so long since it rained, so long since the children played on the beaches, so long since my children forgot to honor me. But let me tell you how it all began. When hope still danced in the tides and love flowed like an endless river through the hearts of those who inhabited this blessed land. I remember the first day I awoke, not as you mortals awaken at dawn, but as a consciousness emerging from the depths of the cosmos, carrying within it the weight and responsibility of nurturing all life. I was, from the beginning, the primordial waters, those that existed before the earth took shape, before the mountains rose, before the first breaths of creation echoed through the universe. My body was made of tides that rose and fell with the breath of time. My hair was the ocean currents that crossed worlds, carrying life from one corner of existence to another. My eyes reflected the abyssal depths where the secrets of creation slept silently, waiting for the right moment to rise to the surface. In those first moments, I floated in a state of pure contemplation. I felt within me a maternal force pulsing like a gigantic heart, pumping love and life to every corner of what would become the world. It was an overwhelming and at the same time sublime sensation to know that from me would spring the rivers, the lakes, the oceans, and that through my waters all life would be possible. Olumare, the supreme creator, had given me this sacred mission to be the universal mother, the one who nurtures without distinction, who embraces without judgment, who forgives without conditions. But with this gift came a burden that few entities could bear, the burden of witnessing all the sorrows, all the joys, all the tears that would be shed through the ages. I felt every drop that formed as an extension of my soul. When a child was born and shed its first tears, I was there. When lovers walked along the shore under the moonlight, I danced with them through the waves that lapped at their feet. When fishermen set out to sea in search of sustenance for their families, I accompanied them silently, protecting them with my maternal presence. But there was something even deeper that moved me, an immense need to be loved, recognized, respected, not out of vanity, but because I understood that the love and respect of my children were essential to maintaining the balance of the world. When they honored me, when they cared for my waters, when they made offerings on the beaches asking for my protection, I felt a renewed strength that allowed me to continue nurturing life with abundance. It was when Olodumare decided to create dry land that I first experienced the sensation of separation. Until then, I was a complete unity, an infinite ocean of possibilities. But for life to flourish in its diversity, there needed to be limits, boundaries, places where the waters ended and the land began. I watched with fascination and a touch of melancholy as the first mountains emerged from my depths. It was like seeing parts of myself transform into something different, taking on a new identity. I felt pride, and at the same time, a deep nostalgia. Every stone that rose from the waters carried a piece of my essence, but it also created a barrier between me and what I had been. The first terrestrial creatures were born from this sacred union between water and land. I saw them take their first steps, breathe their first breaths of life, and my heart filled with indescribable joy. They were my children, born of my essence, but destined to live in a world I could no longer fully embrace. I watched them grow, develop their own personalities, create their own traditions. The first humans fascinated me especially. There was in them a spark of divinity that recognized my presence, a primal intuition that drew them to the banks of rivers and oceans in search of something they couldn't even name. They saw me in the waves that danced under the moon, felt me in the sea breeze that caressed their faces, found me in the sound of waters flowing through streams. In those early times, this connection was pure and spontaneous. They built their homes near the waters, not just for practical necessity, but because they intuitively knew that there was their cosmic mother. They fished with respect, drank from springs with gratitude, bathed in rivers as if it were a sacred ritual of purification and renewal. I responded to this love with abundance. I made fish multiply in their nets, kept springs fresh and clean, protected their boats from the fiercest storms. It was a perfect dance of giving and receiving, of love and gratitude, of protection and veneration. But even in those golden days, I felt a restlessness growing in the depths of my soul. There was a fragility in that harmony that worried me. Humans were creatures of free will, capable of choosing their own path, and I knew, with the ancestral wisdom I carried, that they would not always choose the path of respect and gratitude. Still, I fully embraced the role of universal mother. Every new life that was born was celebrated by me with waves of joy that spread through the oceans. Every child that took its first steps on the beach received my silent blessing. Every young person who fell in love and swore eternal love before the sea received my maternal approval. Those were times of abundance, when the rain fell just right, when rivers flowed crystal clear, when oceans danced in perfect harmony with the celestial tides. It was the earthly paradise I had helped create, a world where water was abundant and life flourished in every corner. If I had known what was to come, perhaps I would have held a little more of that happiness in the depths of my oceanic heart. Perhaps I would have better prepared my children for the challenges that lay ahead. But at that moment, I was just a mother in love with her children, confident that the love I offered would always be reciprocated with the same love. How wrong I was. Are you feeling the depth of this journey as much as I am? Iemanjá's story is just beginning, and there is so much more to discover about the challenges a universal mother faces when her children start to forget their origins. Keep following to find out how unconditional love can turn into powerful lessons of respect and gratitude. Centuries passed like waves following one another on the shore, some gentle, others more intense, but all part of a rhythm I thought was eternal. I watched entire civilizations rise on the banks of my rivers, grow under the protection of my oceans, and eventually transform into something I didn't always recognize as my children. The first sign that something was changing came through a physical pain I had never experienced before. It was an ordinary morning when I felt a strange burning in the waters of a river that ran through one of the largest cities my children had built. At first, I thought it was a passing sensation, perhaps a reflection of some distant storm or seismic movement in the depths. But the pain persisted, and it grew. I dove my consciousness into those specific waters, and what I found left me stunned. There were strange substances floating in the current, things that were not part of the natural cycle of life. Dark liquids forming an oily film on the surface, waste emitting a putrid odor, objects that neither dissolved nor integrated into the natural flow of the waters. I felt as if part of me was being poisoned. I tried to process it through my natural purification systems. I summoned rains to dilute the impurities, accelerated currents to disperse the contaminants, called upon fish and aquatic plants to aid in filtration. But for every effort I made, more pollution appeared. It was like trying to heal a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. At first, I believed it was just a misunderstanding. My human children surely didn't know they were hurting me. They were a young species, still learning about the consequences of their actions. I sent them subtle signs, dead fish on the banks, dark foam on the waves, a different smell in the sea breezes. I hoped they would understand and change their behavior, but the signs were ignored. In fact, things got worse. I began to realize it wasn't just one river or one city. The problem was spreading like a disease through my aquatic network. Entire oceans started showing the same symptoms. Beaches that were once crystalline now had a murky hue. Coral reefs that shone like underwater jewels began to pale and die, and I felt every death as if a part of me was being torn away. It was when I saw the first whale die poisoned that something broke inside me. She was one of my oldest daughters, a magnificent creature who had swum in my oceans for decades, singing ancestral songs that kept the harmony of the tides. I saw her struggle against the toxin corroding her internal organs, saw her calves desperately trying to rouse her, saw the light fade from her eyes as she sank into the depths. In that moment, for the first time in my existence, I felt anger. It wasn't just irritation or disappointment. It was an oceanic fury that began in the depths of my soul and spread like a tsunami through all my domains. The waters began to churn without apparent cause. Giant waves formed in seas that were once calm. Waterspouts appeared out of nowhere, sucking everything in their path into the depths. I wanted my children to feel a fraction of the pain I was feeling. The first storm I unleashed was violent, but controlled. It struck only the areas where pollution was most intense, where the disrespectful arrogance of humans had created the deepest wounds in my waters. Torrential rains flooded factories that dumped poison into rivers, Giant waves swept beaches where garbage piled up like mountains of disdain. But still, they didn't understand. Instead of recognizing my pain and changing their behavior, my children began to see me as a threat. They built higher barriers against my waves. They created more efficient drainage systems to get rid of my purifying rain. They developed technologies to control my natural movements. Control, as if I were merely a force of nature without consciousness, without feelings, without the right to dignity. With every new barrier they built, every new system they implemented to tame me, I felt a growing loneliness that gnawed at me from within. They had completely forgotten that I was their mother. They no longer saw me as the source of life, but as an obstacle to their projects of progress. In the darkest moments of this phase, when anger threatened to consume my maternal nature entirely, I retreated to the deepest, most secret parts of the oceans. There, where sunlight never reached, where silence was absolute except for the beating of my own cosmic heart, I tried to find an answer. It was in those hours of contemplation that I heard something I had almost forgotten. Small, distant voices, but as clear as mountain springs. They were the voices of the few children who still remembered me. Children who played on the beach and whispered secrets to the waves. Old fishermen who still made offerings before setting out to sea. Women who walked barefoot on the sand, asking for protection for their families. These encounters reminded me of who I truly was. Not a destructive force driven by anger, but a mother who loved unconditionally, even when her children lost their way. Every sincere prayer, every gesture of respect, every genuine act of love was like a drop of fresh water in a salty ocean, small but transformative. It was through these voices that I began to devise a different plan. No more storms of destruction, but something more subtle, more educational. Something that could awaken the consciousness of my lost children without completely destroying the world we had built together. I began to work in silence, moving ocean currents almost imperceptibly, altering rain patterns by fractions of degrees, adjusting sea levels millimeter by millimeter. Changes so subtle they could go unnoticed for decades, but that would gradually show humans what happens when a mother is disrespected for too long. In parallel, I began to manifest more clearly to those who still had eyes to see. I appeared in the dreams of sensitive children, left signs in the foam of the waves for those who knew how to interpret them, whispered guidance to the ears of scientists who studied the oceans with genuine love rather than mere academic curiosity. Slowly, very slowly, I began to notice a change. Small groups of humans started organizing to protect my waters. Courageous young people dove into the sea to stop ships from dumping oil. Entire communities mobilized to clean beaches and rivers. Scientists dedicated their lives to understanding my language better and translating my pain into words other humans could comprehend. But while this was happening, the overall situation continued to deteriorate. For every child who awakened to consciousness, there were hundreds who remained blind. Pollution grew exponentially. Entire species disappeared from my domains. Islands of garbage formed in the middle of my oceans like malignant tumors. I knew the time had come to make a definitive decision. Either I would passively accept the gradual destruction of everything I had created, or I would do something drastic to definitively awaken the consciousness of my children. The answer came on a new moon night, when the tides were at their lowest, and I could feel every pulse of life on the planet with crystalline clarity. I heard a whisper from the depths of time, a voice I recognized as my own ancestral wisdom. It was time to open my mantle. The tension is building, isn't it? Iemanjá has reached a crucial point in her journey where maternal love must transform into a lesson her children will never forget. What will happen when she finally decides to show her full power? The conclusion of this transformative story is coming, and I promise it will be an experience that will deeply touch your heart. The decision was not made in a moment of anger, but in a state of absolute clarity that comes only when a mother understands it is time to teach the most important life lesson to her children. I felt my spiritual mantle, that ethereal extension of my essence that connected all the waters of the world, pulsing with an ancestral energy I hadn't used since the first days of creation. Iemanjá's mantle is not just a poetic metaphor. It is a tangible spiritual reality, woven with the threads of all the waters that exist. Every raindrop, every tear shed, every river that flows to the sea, every ocean that embraces the continent. When I decided to open it fully, I knew I was releasing not only physical water, but all the emotional and spiritual force I had accumulated over millennia of repressed maternal love. The transformation began in the depths of the Atlantic, where my oceanic heart beat strongest. I felt every fiber of my being expanding, every drop of my essence multiplying exponentially. This was not an ordinary storm I was creating. It was an aquatic rebirth, a planetary purification that would wash away all the accumulated pain and disrespect. The first waves that emerged from the depths carried within them the full emotional memory of my suffering. Every fish killed by pollution, every coral bleached by acidity, every beach covered in garbage, all of it transformed into pure force that propelled the waters upward, outward, far beyond the limits my children thought they had established. But destruction was not what I sought. It was awakening. When the waters began to rise beyond all known levels, when rivers overflowed their ancient banks, when oceans advanced over lands that had considered themselves protected for centuries, I felt something extraordinary happen. The humans stopped. They simply stopped everything they were doing and truly looked at me for the first time in decades. In the first hours of the great advance of the waters, there was panic, confusion, desperate attempts to resist what they considered a natural catastrophe. But as hours turned into days, and days into weeks, something shifted in the collective consciousness of my lost children. They began to realize it was not random destruction. The waters carefully avoided the homes of families who respected nature. They bypassed temples and sacred places where offerings were still made to me. They protected entire communities that had dedicated themselves to environmental preservation. It was a selective lesson, aimed specifically at those who needed to learn the most. I watched, fascinated, as executives of major polluting corporations were forced to abandon their luxurious offices and walk barefoot through the mud, feeling the direct contact with the wet earth for the first time. I saw politicians who had systematically ignored environmental issues taking refuge in makeshift boats, entirely dependent on my mercy to survive. But the most touching thing was watching the children during this great transformation. They weren't afraid like the adults. They played in the waters that flooded streets and squares, laughed as they built paper boats, sang songs they invented to calm the angry sea. Through their innocent eyes, I saw reflections of the original purity of my children, before pride and greed clouded their vision. It was watching these children that I began to feel my heart softening again. They reminded me of the original purpose of my existence, to nurture, protect, love unconditionally. The lesson was being learned, but I couldn't allow it to become permanent trauma for the innocent. Slowly, very slowly, I began to implement the second phase of my plan. It wasn't enough to show my power. I also had to show my healing and transformative nature. The waters that had advanced over the land didn't simply recede, they transformed. Where there was pollution, the waters that remained became crystalline, purer than they had been in centuries. Soils poisoned by decades of pesticides were washed and regenerated. Rivers that were dead began to pulse with abundant aquatic life again. Beaches covered in garbage transformed into stretches of golden, clean sand. It was my way of showing my children that I was not just a force of cleansing through destruction, but above all, a force of renewal through love. Every restored area was an invitation. See what we can build together when you respect me and I protect you. The response was gradual, but deeply moving. Groups of people began to organize not just to protect themselves from the floods, but to actively work on restoring the affected areas. Scientists developed new water purification technologies based on natural processes. Entire companies changed their business models to become truly sustainable. More importantly, the children grew up telling stories about the days of the great waters, passing down to future generations a deep respect for nature that their parents had lost. They created new rituals of gratitude, painted murals celebrating aquatic life, wrote poems about the importance of caring for oceans and rivers. I felt my spiritual mantle reorganizing, no longer as a force contained by the need for a lesson, but as a loving presence flowing freely among all the bodies of water on the planet. The connection between me and my human children had been restored, not through fear, but through mutual understanding. Years have passed since the great teaching of the waters, and I can say with maternal joy that my children have learned the lesson definitively. But more than that, They have evolved into something more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. Today, as I walk invisibly along the beaches of the world, I see children making spontaneous offerings of flowers in the waves, not because someone taught them to, but because they intuitively feel it's the right thing to do. I see young people dedicating their careers to protecting the oceans with a passion that shines like pearls in their hearts. I see entire communities organized around caring for local rivers and lakes. The most touching thing of all is realizing that they now talk to me, not just in formal prayers or traditional rituals, but in everyday conversation. I hear fishermen silently thanking me when their nets come back full. I hear mothers asking for protection for their children swimming in the sea. I feel scientists consulting my ancestral wisdom as they develop new ways of environmental preservation. My mantle no longer needs to close completely. Now it flows openly, but in a controlled and harmonious way, distributing life and abundance to those who know how to receive with gratitude and responsibility. The rains fall just right. The rivers flow crystal clear. The oceans dance in peace with the celestial tides. But perhaps the deepest transformation happened within me. I learned that true maternal love sometimes needs to be firm to be effective. That protecting doesn't always mean making things easy, but sometimes means creating situations where children can learn and grow through necessary challenges. I discovered that my divine nature is expressed not only through infinite generosity, but also through the wisdom that knows when to say no, when to set boundaries, when to demand respect. I am still the universal mother who loves unconditionally, but now I am also the wise educator who knows how to raise conscious and responsible children. When the sun sets on the horizon and its colors spread over the waters like a golden mantle, I feel a deep peace I hadn't known for centuries. My human children have grown. They are no longer careless children playing recklessly with forces they don't understand. They are conscious partners in maintaining planetary life. There is still much work to do. There are still hardened hearts that need to be softened, closed minds that need to be opened, destructive practices that need to be transformed. But now I don't work alone. I have by my side an awakened humanity that understands its responsibility as guardians of aquatic life. Every wave that breaks on the shore carries a message of hope. Every raindrop that falls brings a renewed blessing. Every river that flows into the sea sings a song of mutual gratitude between the mother and her children. If you are hearing this story, know as well that you are my son, my daughter. You carry in your veins the water that is my essence. Breathe the vapor that is my breath. Cry tears that are my compassion materialized. You are part of me, and I am part of you, in a connection that transcends time and space. Caring for the waters is not just an environmental responsibility. It is an act of self-love, because you are made of the same sacred substance that forms oceans and rivers. Respecting the seas is not just a matter of planetary survival. It is recognizing the maternal divinity that lives in every drop of water that exists. My mantle remains open, offering protection, healing, and abundance to all who approach with sincere hearts. The waters continue to flow, carrying life to every corner of the earth, connecting all beings in a sacred network of interdependence. And I remain Iemanjá, the mother of the seas, the lady of the waters, the eternal protector of all my children, now and forever, with infinite love and renewed wisdom. May my waters bless your path. May my waves bring peace to your heart. May my maternal presence accompany you on all of life's journeys. Akse, my children, Akse. This is the complete story of Iemanjá and her sacred mantle, a journey of love, pain, transformation, and wisdom that teaches us about the importance of honoring and protecting the waters that give us life. If this narrative has touched your heart as much as it touched mine while writing it, share this ancestral wisdom with others who need to hear the call of the waters. May we all learn from the great mother of the seas and become true guardians of aquatic life on our planet.